Welcome to the Pathways to Success. I'm Julian Placino, recruiting professional turned success speaker, show host, and media entrepreneur. This show is dedicated to helping you find your unique pathway to success by having conversations that educate, inspire, and transform. Together, we'll interview some of the world's greatest leaders and uncover their secrets to success. Thanks for tuning in, and on to the show. Welcome to episode 200 of the Pathways to Success, where we help you find your unique pathway to success by having conversations that educate, inspire, and transform with the world's greatest leaders. I'm Julian Placino, your host, and we have an outstanding show for you today. But before we get kicked off, today is episode 200. It is a huge milestone, and I want to say thank you to you and to anyone who has ever liked, commented, or subscribed that has helped the show and platform become what it is today. And I'm fully committed to continuing to create inspiring content to help you find your pathway to success. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by my good friends at Code Up, the premier technology career accelerator in Texas. Code Up's web development and data science programs will take you from beginner to job-ready professional in 22 weeks from the comfort of your own home. Code Up's data science program has an 88% employment rate, and their web development program has an astonishing 99% employment rate. Code Up is so confident in their programs that if you don't find a career in field within 6 months of graduating, you'll receive a 100% tuition refund. So if you are ready to start your career in web development or data science, I recommend you check out Code Up at codeup.com. That's CODEUP.com. It is my pleasure to welcome our featured guest, Lawrence King, CEO at Headstorm. Lawrence, welcome to the Pathways to Success. How are you, man?
Good. Thank you for having me, Julian, and congratulations on this being your 200th show. That's remarkable.
Yeah, it has absolutely been quite the adventure, and quite frankly, it was because of this content creation journey that brought us together, right? Like, how was it? Do you remember how we originally connected? Do you remember?
We originally connected through City Central when we were sharing workspace out of there. And I remember that you'd worked at Bottle Rocket, and you were an amazing recruiter over there. And I got to see you a couple times over there, and we'd sat down maybe by the beer dispenser, and you'd ask me some questions, very curious about what we did, and we had a great conversation and kicked it off. And you asked if we had had done media before or was interested in doing an interview. And I thought, wow, this sounds really interesting. And you just had a different approach than I've heard in the past.
And finally, we are here.
We are here.
So I'm glad to have you. Lawrence, let's jump right in. Just so we can create some context for our viewers and everyone tuning in, tell us, what is Headstorm?
Sure. So Headstorm is a digital product and engineering firm. And what that means is, it's a sort of the one-line elevator pitch, but what that means is we really build digital products and help companies think through the strategy, help them understand the design elements and how to go through the whole software development lifecycle, and provide them a roadmap and a vision of where they want to be. And then on the engineering side, we also execute and build those solutions. And a lot of what we focus on is not necessarily kind of run-of-the-mill applications, but it's really the hard solutions that we're trying to solve. Stuff that many companies have difficulty with their internal teams solving, because their internal teams are busy working on their roadmap items. And so we really have carved out a niche for us where we're able to come in and accomplish some really amazing, ambitious challenges in a short period of time.
You know, Lawrence, part of why I started the show, because I was always fascinated by entrepreneurship and stories of entrepreneurship. So I'm curious about the genesis story of Headstorm. If Headstorm was created into like a documentary film, what does that opening scene look like?
It would probably start many, many years ago, right?
Okay.
In terms of how I started getting into entrepreneurship. But I'll skip all of that, and I'll just say that Headstorm was really started as a I started it as a company to do a product, and that product was it was called Appquity, and the idea was they would help developers and companies come together and trade currency for their services, not in cash, but in micro equity percentages. And so it was an app that would manage all that for people, so companies could go out and find developers, and those developers could come in and they would complete tasks, and then they would get little micro equity percentages of it. And I was going to fund it with consulting. And that was sort of the genesis. And the name Headstorm ended up coming out because Brainstorm was taken. And I love the Brainstorm name, so I'm like, Headstorm's not. And so we were able to secure the .net version of that. And then a couple years later, was able to buy the .com version. But the first year, the consulting side took off so fast that we didn't have time to work on Appquity, the product for which the company was originally created. And so we ended up, it's been a pretty aggressive 4 to 5 years of growth in terms of doubling in size each year and bringing on bigger, larger clients and hiring, some really smart people to come in and help us, move forward on this journey.
And as far as your background, have you started a business before? Was this your first one? Like, when did that transition sort of take place for you?
Yeah, so I was, interestingly enough, when I was a kid, I coded. My mom had a small, successful tax practice, and whenever I was sick, she would just bring me into her office, and I would basically work from her office or stay home sick from her office. But she was very technology forward. And so she had all of the latest and greatest computers that had come out. And the older ones that she retired, she had in another room, and I would sit there, and she set up a spot where I could work on these. And so I learned that my first programming language was BASIC and then QBasic,
wow.
just playing around on her computers. And so really, she gave me that opportunity, putting me in that environment, and her forwardness into technology is really what gave me the opportunity to get interested in technology. And so from there, when I was 17, I created a company called Image Author, and that was to build websites.
Oh, wow, okay.
And, I was young, 17. I'd gone out into the market and found a couple clients that probably weren't the best and maybe took advantage of me a little bit because of my age. And I thought, I don't want that to happen again. And so I decided, at some point I was going to go to law school. And so when I graduated undergrad in Reno, Nevada, I came here to SMU to go to law school so I could learn that part of the business and understand, how to protect myself and others in the entrepreneurial space. And then when I was in law school, I was still eager to do development. And I remember I took out loans to go, and I got loans for books, specifically for law school books, and I ended up spending that money on programming books. And I had to call my parents to ask for more money and loan me some money so I could go buy the actual law books that I was supposed to be buying with it. But I'd always had a passion for development, and I went out and I practiced for a few years, thought it was okay, but really wanted to get back into technology. And so I did a couple startups and built my own applications for a few years. I exited a few of those, with modest exits, and then really dove deeper into architecture, solution architecture, enterprise architecture, and then went out and did contracting for about 2 to 3 years with some pretty large companies to help them with their architecture. And that's when I really pivoted, and I thought, you know what? I have got such an admiration for developers, for designers, for anyone that's in the technology space, but particularly the technicians. And I thought, you know what, I think that I could start a company and really leverage their horsepower and provide them a career path and a way to get to that next level. Because at the time, a lot of employers thought, they just had a different outlook on technicians. And when I say technicians, I'm talking about product, design, and engineering technicians, the people that are actually doing the work.
Making the stuff, yeah.
Sure. And so I wanted to create a company that provided a career path for these folks. They're amazingly smart people. And, I think that sometimes they can hit a glass ceiling because, when you're deep down in code, you're super focused, and maybe you're not the most articulate person out there. Maybe you're not selling yourself in a way that you should be. that really explains your value. And I thought I would love to be able to create a company to help not only provide them great technical problems to solve, but also to give them an opportunity for all of us to learn on how do we become good sales folks, and how do we sell ourselves well, and how do we facilitate conversations and become articulate so that we don't hit that glass ceiling like most technical folks do once they have to start transitioning into management.
You know, that is actually something that I do find very unique about Headstorm. As you know, Lawrence, my background is talent acquisition, recruiting and staffing in technology is what I've done for 12 years. But there seemed to be very much an engineering-centric focus to an approach when it comes to Headstorm, because there's always, when it comes to custom development, this sort of battle between sales and engineering, you know, sales and delivery. So I'm curious, how else does that manifest in terms of being an engineering-first firm?
Right. So, you know, we really focus on the engineering skills and the aptitude. We don't take on a particular technology and say, hey, we have to have a bunch of .NET developers or Java developers. We just want people that are curious and passionate. If we can find them, then we can teach them which tools to use, and they're happy to transition back and forth. One part of being an entrepreneur is I originally I had to go out and seek help. I had never done a consulting firm before. And so I understood how to code. I understood some of the legal aspects of the contracts and whatnot, but I didn't understand how to build a company and how to really effectively lead a large group of people. And so I met a person, his name was Rene Larave, and he said, the first thing you need to do is you need to set up an advisory board. And I did that, and he was my first advisor. And in there, he had exited a consulting firm and grew it to 175 or 200 people, and then exited. So he had all the experience of how to grow a firm. And some of the things that he asked me to do in the beginning, I thought, man, that's a lot of work. And we're not big enough to where that really matters. And by the way, I'm also developing and selling and doing all of these things. He said, just trust me, do it. And I did. And one of those things, he said, you need to build an expectations framework. And this framework is going to show, you need to clearly define how the things that matter to your employees at each level, the levels themselves, and how they get progressed from one level to the next. And that process took me about 6 months, and we call it the Headstorm Expectations Framework.
Interesting.
And our culture has really wrapped around this expectations framework. At the end of the year, we have performance reviews, and we spend, probably the partners and leadership and everybody easily spend 40 hours going through and evaluating everyone, and each of our employees gets a couple references, and they're all evaluated against this framework. And at the end of the day, we sit down and we compile this review, and then we talk to our employees about it and say, hey, here's where you're succeeding in these expectations, here's areas of improvement, and here's how we can help you improve in these areas. And so now everybody, it feels a lot like a university in that way, because it's not too dissimilar from a university setting where you've got a curriculum and you've got tests and then you've got a review at the end of the year. And so that's really been a big part of driving the culture and showing our employees, how do you get from point A to point B? Let's start technical, and let's all be technical in the beginning of our careers, but then at some point we're going to need to start taking on leadership roles. And here's the things that we need to work on in order to be effective leaders.
And that makes a ton of sense, because what I've seen, especially in organizations that sort of appear to be flat, it's like engineers can make all this great work, but it's like, what's next? What's the career progression? And you've actually defined that for them. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and it's particularly important now.
Yeah.
A lot of people, or a lot of workers out there, especially in the technology space, are evaluating their work-life balance. They're evaluating their happiness in terms of where they're at. And if they lose sight of the light at the end of the tunnel, then they're likely to leave and go find it somewhere else. And so a big part of Headstorm is a community where we're all curious, and we're all helping pull each other up and learn new challenging techniques and mechanics, and constantly talking about here, it's not just to see the end goal in mind. That's one, that's important. But the second thing that's important is showing them the pathway to get there. Here's how we're going to pull you here. And that was something that we learned probably our third year in business. The first 3 years, it was the framework really served as sort of just metrics. Here's what it looks like to be in this role. And we saw, some people were sort of floundering in there and they didn't understand how to get from point A to point B. And so we really started pushing on, we need to provide training. And 2020 and 2021 has been all about how do we train them and show them and pull them along through each of these levels, which has been immensely helpful.
I really love that. So Lawrence, before we take our first commercial break here, tell us what is your why behind Headstorm? What is your mission, and what do you think the future of it is?
Yeah, the mission is I really want to grow I want to take engineers who I've got, like I said before, a huge admiration for, and I think that they're all-star athletes, and I want to create a professional, not athletic team, but academic team, but in the same way, they're also, professionals, and I want to take them and build them and create a culture that solves challenging problems for organization and humanity at large. I think that if you build the culture first, you can always pivot. If you have amazing people, you can pivot from a services company, you can pivot into a product company, you can have lots of flexibility. And so really building a culture of just smart, collaborative, amazing people is really kind of goal one. Everything else will follow.
Yeah, and that's great. And one of the ways that I sort of disseminate truth is how many times can I hear the same idea appear within a different set of context. Almost every great leader that I talk about always talks about putting culture first, and it seems that Headstorm is no exception to that. So that's awesome.
That's good. That's good that you noticed that, because we work hard on it.
Absolutely. So Lawrence, we're going to take a quick commercial break to hear from our sponsors.
You want to transition out of your career and do something tech related. CodeUp is the place for you. When I came to CodeUp, I was actually working at a chain hair salon. It was just starting not to be for me anymore. My goals were to never work a weekend ever again, to have full health care and benefits, and to just have more time with my son. And now I've met all of those goals. I don't have any regrets. I just regret not coming sooner when I saw those billboards and I was driving down the highway.
And we're back with Lawrence King, CEO at Headstorm. Lawrence, something we do now here at Pathways for a token of appreciation for all of our guests is a small gift here for you, courtesy of our friends at Dead Soxy. And it is none other than your own custom pair of Pathways to Success.
Nice.
Designed by Dead Soxy.
I appreciate that. These are great. By the way, I love Happy Socks.
How about that? There you go.
This will add to my drawer of Happy Socks. I love these things.
Awesome.
Great,
awesome.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dead Soxy, for supporting the show. And of course, use the promo code Pathways for 30% off. So, Lawrence, let's jump right into your keys to success. And I truly believe that success leaves clues. And that's why I love interviewing human beings who've created incredible results, because there's sort of breadcrumbs that we can sort of tease out and learn upon and apply in our own lives. One thing that you're really passionate about speaking on is this idea of an inside-out growth mindset. What is that?
That's the idea that before you start learning the habits and you really start diving in, you have to really focus on your mindset. And the mindset is really getting thinking with the end in mind. If I want to start, if I want to create a company, then I have to start thinking, okay, what do people successful at creating companies, how do they behave? And what are the takeaways that I need to think about there? And the mindset is the authentic mindset. It's not a personality trait that you're sort of manipulating. If you go into a meeting that maybe you don't want to have with somebody and you're like, okay, you kind of put on your happy face and you go in, and then when you come out of the meeting, then you're back to maybe frowny face, right? It's not that. It's about really trying to tune your brain around into thinking about things in terms of opportunities. There's a great book out there, and I can't remember the author, and Carolyn, I can't remember, but it's called The Growth Mindset. And it's all about thinking about things in terms of opportunities rather than the negative impacts on you. How can you turn something into an opportunity? And that has been extremely helpful. It's been something that there's been a lot of adversity that I've experienced, and we all do, you know, starting our own businesses, and being able to look for the silver lining in that is what's most important, because there's always silver lining. And so it's really about, let's work on the mindset about how we're truly changing the way we think about something. And then once we do that, then we can start building the habits around that, because the habits aren't going to fall apart. They have a foundation to anchor to.
Is there a nuance between an inside-out mindset and what we have just heard typically as the growth mindset?
That there is a nuance there. So when I think about inside-out mindset, it's about first addressing your own fears and really thinking about the end in mind. Who do you want to be? Where do you want to be? And then really associating, trying to say, okay, how do I not be so codependent on others? How do I start building my own independence? And I can't lead others if I can't lead myself. I can't lead a company if I can't lead my family.
Right.
And so I need to first be able to lead myself, and that requires discipline and foregoing things that maybe, you know, I want to do but aren't in the best interest of myself. And if I can master that, then I can master it with my family and lead my family. When I can master my family and lead my family, then I can go out and I can lead others. But the moment, it has to be from the inside out, because the moment it starts getting shaky in the family, you're going to see repercussions downstream with the company. And so, or the moment that I'm feeling anxiety for a particular reason, or I'm scared about something, I have to solve that. And I try to do that through meditation and really understand what's on my mind. I'll write it down. I've got a book that a notebook that I write things down in. And really, I don't ever reflect on them afterwards, but it's just the practice of getting it out. Then once I understand what's bothering me, then I can solve it. But that's the first, like, code blue is me. And then I have to solve myself first. And then I can help with my family. And it's that inside out mentality that I found has been extremely successful.
Interesting. I'm very curious about the way that you process fear. You mentioned meditation, the journaling piece, and the journey of the entrepreneur is just one that's filled with twists and turns and uncertainty. How have you dealt with that in the past, and what can our audience learn and take away from that?
Yeah. I've dealt with it in the past by surrounding myself with people who I can go to ask, because I don't have all the questions or the answers, right? But I have to be vulnerable and willing to go out and share my fears and some of the problems and adversity I'm facing with others. And more often than not, probably 99% of the time, people are willing to listen and provide feedback. And I'll chat about that with a lot of different advisors and other people that I have trust in my network. And then I think about everything that they told me, and then I think about what makes sense for me and sort of my values and principles. And that's always helped me come up with a solution. And so that's been being able to reach out to others and being vulnerable has been super helpful in handling that adversity.
So from a business perspective, 2020 obviously was a crazy year for basically every business out there, and I know your business was impacted as well. So I'm curious, what are some of the things that you have done, lessons learned that have helped you become a stronger entrepreneur?
Wow, there were a lot of lessons learned in 2020, a lot of fear and anxiety. And one of the things that I learned is that it's back to this inside out mindset. If I'm fearful and I don't solve that, I can't help keep everyone else from being fearful and from walking off the ledge. And so really trying to first address my own fears through 2020, the anxiety, perhaps laying folks off, or the fact that we're going to be taking losses for months on end. All of that I had to get my arms around in a hurry, so that then I could be able to be an anchor and support to our employees and help provide as much communication and transparency as I could, without scaring them in certain ways. And so really being able to master, you know, the communications and how I speak to people. Before, it was very, before COVID, you know, it was very cheerleader, let's go. You know, nothing can beat us. And when we got into COVID, I had to try to maintain that message, and it was really hard because inside, we're getting beat. And how can I communicate that authentically so my employees have something to anchor to, and they still believe the mission is there? And so really kind of working through that problem and challenge was a big learning moment for me.
Yeah. Something else that I know you're passionate about speaking on is this idea of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think this lesson applies to being an entrepreneur, a corporate professional, a student, or whatnot. Where do you want to start with that, Lawrence?
So getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. This is one of those notes that I wrote, and it really sat in my brain to the point where when I write some of these sort of directives, they're sort of my prime directives down. I'll take a snapshot from my phone on the notebook, and then I'll save that as a screensaver. So every time I pick up my phone, these things are top of mind. And getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is really the essence of being an entrepreneur. You're living in uncertainty. No, nothing is set in stone, and there's no sure bet on anything. And so being comfortable with that uncertainty and having to take on roles and learn new skills and do things that most people, they don't want to pivot that hard, right? People, once they learn something, they tend to stay in their comfort zone, and that comfort zone is the enemy. You have to master a lot of other things that are outside of that comfort zone. And so going out and making cold calls, perhaps letting an employee go, separating with a partner, you know, a vendor or something like that, having challenging conversations, all of the things that are uncomfortable. No one else is going to do that except for you. And in fact, you should be the one doing it in a lot of cases, because then you're leading by example and showing others how to do it. And so there's been times where it's like you as an entrepreneur, you get loaded up with lots of different tasks that you have to do. And so there was one where I was dealing with a bunch of issues, and one I had to put a deck together, and it was a pretty complex deck, and I was just procrastinating. I was so frustrated with it, and then the guilt started setting in, and so then I went in and started doing my meditation, and I'm like, man, I need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and that's my prime directive. And so whenever I feel uncomfortable, I'm going to think about this saying, and I'm going to do it anyway, and I'm not going to let procrastination get the better of me.
Can you describe a little bit more about your meditation practice? It seems like something you keep going back to, so it's something that's working and is adding value to your life. Tell us about that, Lawrence.
It's just, I started just focusing on breathing and trying to understand what all this meditation thing was. Is it for real? And then I thought, you know what? I started measuring my heartbeats, and as I got maybe a couple minutes into it, I'm like, man, I think my heart rate went down. I'm like, this is working. And then I read another book, and it said, listen, you should start thinking, once you get past that, you can kind of get into a place where you're relaxed, then you can start thinking, doing some introspection and understanding what these feelings are, and start sort of peeling back the layers to try to get to what those inner anxieties are. And so I focus a lot on that, and I keep asking why. Why am I feeling that way? And your brain will kind of go on, and then I'll say why again. And eventually I'll be able to kind of get to the heart of it. And once I get to the heart of it and I can put a finger and identify it, now I can solve it. And then it goes onto my notebook. You
know why I totally agree with this is because entrepreneurs are really bad at sort of being still, because we're constantly trying to control and to sort of fix things, right? There really does seem to be so much value in finding insights through stillness. I don't know about your meditation practice, but mine involves being quiet and not having any kind of distraction. And for me as an entrepreneur, it's like, this doesn't seem like so much value to my life because I need to be doing things. But that is actually also when I get some of the most profound business insights, is in the silence.
Right. That's exactly right. There has to be some silent time. There has to be time that you set aside for yourself in order to focus on yourself. And that's part of the inside out mindset is you have to be the anchor. And so that alone time is really what grounds you.
Yeah. Any other advice? If you, let's say we want to practice becoming uncomfortable to experience that personality growth, what kind of recommendations would you have for us?
Oh, you know what? I would say, go through, whenever I do my task list, and I think of, okay, I use my phone, and so I have a task list on my phone, and I'm getting things out of my head, and that reduces anxiety in and of itself, right? And once they're in my task list, then it's a matter of prioritizing them. And I'll prioritize the ones that you just feel it. There's a little pang of anxiety. It's like, I have to deal with this. I'll move that to the top.
Yeah.
And that's one way to get into it. And then and then to think about, what are some of the areas that I'm not good at? Typically the things that people have gaps in are the areas that they're uncomfortable. And they've done it sort of maybe knowingly or not knowingly, but they'll just say, you know what, I'm not very good at that. I've never tried it, or the last time I tried it, I wasn't very successful, so I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And there's those types of activities that a person could say, you know what, I'm going to pull that back out of the closet and dust it off and try to tackle it again.
Yeah. There really is something about getting the idea out of your head and into something either digital or physical. I think you also mentioned part of your journaling practice is writing down a bunch of thoughts and not necessarily going back to it. I started implementing something similar called Morning Pages by Julia Cameron's The Artist Way. And the purpose is to write 3 pages, not trying to create art, but just to fill it all up.
Right.
And I can tell you, I'm on day, I think, 31 of this, and I feel so much more at peace because it has seemed to quiet the monkey mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and they say that it's 21 days to create a habit, so congratulations, you got a habit now.
Yeah.
21 days is the hardest. There's another book, it's called The Compound Effect.
Oh, yeah.
And I love this book.
Darren Hardy.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right.
Time plus consistency equals success. And most people stop doing something right before they're about to hit that exponential compound factor where they're going to start really seeing the results. And so, it's good that you've done it 30 days now, because now you've got a habit going on.
Yeah.
And having that alone time and being able to get it out of your head is all that's needed. I can't tell you, a lot of my anxiety comes, if you try to manage all of your to-dos or the things you need to think about. You got an email, you got a phone call you got to respond to, you've got a birthday that you have to respond to, it's your anniversary. If that's all floating around in your head and you're trying to manage it that way, which I'm guilty of, that causes anxiety. So I think part of being an entrepreneur, being able to scale your business, is really having an awareness of those things and trying to solve for those, just like you're doing.
Yeah. And something else I have to give you credit for, it was you who told me at the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, before I left Bottle Rocket, you said, Julian, you need to create a board of advisors. Because that was true, because here I am sort of floundering on my own. I need people who are smarter than me to borrow from their intelligence and experience to sort of guide me, right? And I've been doing that. So many incredible mentors from the show really have become that. And it's just coming back to me now, and I want to give you appreciation for that, because that has served me.
Well, that's great. That's good. I appreciate that.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, next Wednesday, I'm meeting with Michael Gordon, who's the founder of Teladoc, previous guest, also Calvin Carter, who's the founder and CEO of Bottle Rocket.
Great advisors.
Yeah.
I use them to bounce ideas off, but more importantly, to hold me accountable. If you're an entrepreneur, typically you're the only one that's holding yourself accountable. Yeah. And if left to my own devices, I could easily get sucked into playing video games. Yeah. Right? And so to avoid that, right, I have to hold myself accountable and make commitments to folks, and it's just your word. All right, we have let's say a monthly board meeting or a quarterly board meeting. I'm going to get these things done. And that's my word, and I've just shared that and made it real that others have heard. Now I have to do it. And so that's a way that I keep challenging myself, is if I say it out loud to somebody, now I have to do it.
There really is something also very important to say about accountability. Myself, I've never really necessarily needed to be accountable because I had so much desire to go do, right? But being accountable to a group of peers and people who are much more quote unquote successful than you in business. That's something great. Have you heard of Vistage?
Yes.
Vistage, I've recently made contacts with Vistage. I went to my first meeting. I went through this whole processing issue process that they have. And just to be able to have a sounding board of getting your ideas out and people adding value to it, poking holes into it, I'm telling you, it's so important.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I think there's a similar organization called EO, and I was part of EO for a little while, and they had this 5% rule that was fascinating to me. And in the forums that they had, they wanted you to talk about the 5%. And the 5% are the things that you can't talk about with your spouse, maybe perhaps because they won't understand, or you have no outlets of people to talk about this particular 5%. And it was really fascinating to be able to share that 5% with other people and then share theirs with yours and be able to come up with some resolutions.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm having some comments here chime into the live stream. It looks like Jason Hopper, he's asking, Lawrence, do you use a specific app for your task list? Thank you, Jason, for that question.
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. You know what? It's nothing too out of the box. I use the Apple, I guess it's the task. The Apple Task app, the one that comes basic with the phone.
Just in the
and the reason I do that is I need something super simple that I can tap on in a hurry and write it and get out. I can't go through a bunch of windows to get to the tasks. I just need something I can click on and write it down, because most of this is just getting it out of your head as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Awesome. Jason, thank you for that question.
Thanks, Jason.
Anybody else tuning in? Okay, good to go. Great advice here from Sherry. Thank you, Jason Hopper, WCD Speakers. Thank you all for tuning in into the live stream. So, Lawrence, I want to close with one final topic here, and I want to give the attribution correct, because I thought it was a quote from you, but it's actually Dr. Seuss, right?
It's Dr. Seuss.
I'm going to read it because I want to get it right. And it is, those that matter don't mind, and those that mind don't matter. What does this mean?
What this means is a lot of times you get wrapped up in your own head as an entrepreneur, and you're constantly worried about what people will think of you. If I do this, what are they going to think? Or if I say this, what are they going to think? And that ends up controlling your destiny.
Yeah.
And I came across this saying, and I thought, man, that really makes a lot of sense. It's so simple, and the people that do matter in my life, they're going to be supportive, and they're going to hear me out, and they're going to be authentic and genuine in their responses back to me. And that may be critical, or it just may be positive and encouragement, but nonetheless, they're going to be authentic. The people that aren't going to be that way, that are immediately going to, just kind of shoot you down or not consider you in an authentic way, they're not going to matter in your life anyhow.
Yeah.
You're going to blow right by them. They spend all of their energy trying to shoot people down and hold people down around them, and you're just going to excel right by them. And so it's a way to think about how to not worry what other people think. And as an entrepreneur, man, everything you do, you're worried about that. How are the employees going to take this new policy? How's this new prospect going to handle this email that I'm going to write to them? And when you get too much into your head, then things slow down, and you're just handicapping yourself in that way.
Yeah.
And so this is a reminder to me to not think like that. Another good saying that I like too is, it's not your business what anyone else thinks. And I always think, I try to have these little, anecdotes in the back of my mind. It's a constant pep talk. Right? As an entrepreneur, you're constantly challenging and pushing, and so you have to have little tricks and sort of brain hacks to be able to get you to that next level. And I try to use them wherever I can, and just some of these sayings are a few of them.
You know why that deeply resonates with me is that, when you discover life seems to be about self-exploration, and a lot of times you can't choose the way that you are sometimes, like discovering your values, discovering your personality characteristics. And one of my top love languages is words of affirmation. And that's why that hits so hard to me, right?
Right.
Doing the show, and also, like, just for the sake of transparency, during the beginning of the show, I feel like I flubbed the ad read for Code Up, and I got Christian here sitting in the live studio audience. So there's all these things coming into my mind right now. So I'm curious, how have you practiced to not be so susceptible to this?
Oh man, that's the secret question.
Yeah.
I think it's almost like meditation.
Yeah.
There's never an end there, and you never solve it completely. You just get incrementally better.
Yeah.
And I do it by, sometimes I'll use anger. I'll get myself so frustrated, like, why do I care what this person thinks? Why am I so worried about that? And then I'll let emotion sink in, and then I'll do what I need to get done.
Yeah.
And so I try to leverage any type of emotion that I have in order to get me to do something that I wouldn't otherwise want to do, or think about something in a way that I wouldn't otherwise want to think about it.
Yeah.
So I just grab what's closest to me from an emotional perspective, and it's sort of like self-coaching or getting yourself pumped up in different ways. I'll use guilt, I'll use anger, I'll use sadness, I'll use happiness, anything that comes to mind to get me to do the things that are tough to do. And that aligns with the being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah. And we're back on episode 200 of the Pathways to Success, featuring CEO at Headstorm, Lawrence King. And as you probably have experienced, we had some technical difficulty here in the studio, but we are back up and running, and we'd love to continue our conversation here with Lawrence. So Lawrence, welcome back, man.
I'm glad we're back.
How about that? All of this discussion about adapting to adversity and change, and of course the power goes out.
Yeah,
So
I think we may have caused that. I think we had a lot of synergy going on.
Absolutely. So let's jump right back into things. And again, this quote, right, that is by Dr. Seuss, which impacted me so much from a personal perspective, and I started going into this rant. But just to restate it, it is, those that matter don't mind, and those that mind don't matter. Cover this for us.
Yeah, I think really it's the people that are closest to you.
Yeah.
They don't mind if you speak your mind and you want to be your authentic self. Those that perhaps aren't closest to you, if you're speaking your authentic mind and living out your best self, if they're not going to buy into allowing you the space to do that, then they don't matter anyways.
Yeah.
And that's really sort of the crux of it. I've got a bunch of these sayings. First off, I have an amazing wife, and she allows me to go out and live this dream and takes care of a ton of things on the backside with my children. I couldn't do this without her. I have 3 beautiful girls. I want them all to grow up to be entrepreneurs. And so I've got a wall, when they come out of their bedroom, I've got a wall with framed pictures with framed sayings on there of all types. Mother Teresa, this Dr. Seuss saying.
Yeah.
I've got about 10 of them on there. And every week when I go up there and I'm playing with them, I make sure, are you guys reading these sayings? I don't need you to be able to recite them to me. I just need to know that over time, these are going to seep into your brain, and they're eventually going to hopefully impact the way that they're programmed. So when they're out, they're not worried about what people think about them, or they're comfortable with adversity, or they're caring and good human beings, right? And so I'm really kind of, these sayings, I think, are little pieces of code that we need to inject in our brain so they sit there and they become part of our wiring.
I love that image and that analogy. I'm curious, you mentioned you had children. What advice would you have for your children to achieve success that you may not have already told them?
Have grit, right? It's going to be hard. You're going to get discouraged, as we all do. You're going to want to quit. But that's when you need to reach deep down inside and find your power. And if you have to use sayings like this, or you have to do things that your dad does with brain hacks to try to, get him to persevere, then do it, because I promise at the end of the day, you will succeed. It just takes time plus consistency is success.
Time plus consistency is success. So I've had a lot of incredible leaders on the show. Of course, you for sure are one of them. The show is called Pathways to Success. What is your personal definition of success?
My personal definition of success is to create, to have enough of a platform and enough of a network and enough people that believe in me, that now with this platform, we can solve bigger problems. We can go out and while the way that we create this platform may be through products and engineering, but there's a humanity piece to this as well. And solving that humanity piece requires a big platform, much bigger than we have. And so success for me is being able to build all of this, create amazing lives for our engineers and our employees, and giving us all a voice so we can impact the future from a large scale. And that's the humanitarian piece of this.
I love that, and I really love everything that you and the team at Headstorm are doing. So, Lawrence, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
I'm thank you for humbling me and asking me to be on the show and share the information that I have. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I want to make a call to action on behalf of Headstorm. Headstorm is hiring. So, Lawrence, please tell our audience how to learn about the job openings, connect with you, connect with Headstorm. Tell us all that.
Absolutely. So we are hiring. We're hiring in lots of different roles. Developers, architects, project leaders. And how you can get in touch with us is going to www.headstorm.com. We have a jobs career page on there that you can click on. In fact, we have a culture page, a page dedicated just to culture that talks about our expectation frameworks, talks about our 5 roles as an evangelist, a leader, a technologist, professional, and an innovator. We've got lots of pictures on there so you can really get a feel for what it's like to work with our company and the family that you would belong to. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to talk to anybody and share my passion about the company. So either through LinkedIn or through our website at headstorm.com.
And we'll make sure to have all of your contact information in the show notes as well. So, Lawrence, this has been a true pleasure. Thank you for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks, Julian.
Absolutely. And everyone else, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Pathways to Success. As always, make sure to subscribe, comment, and share. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Pathways to Success.